Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine Jones and I am a candidate for the MSA program at Elizabeth City State University. I am presenting on behalf of my class of school law with my professor, Dr. Burks. So before I get started with my presentation, I would like to ask all of you beginning teachers, do you know your rights? Do you know that as an educator, you have rights as well as the students have rights? Do you know the difference between the student rights and the teacher rights? So I just want you to keep that in mind as we go on with this presentation. Do you know your rights? So jumping right into this presentation, the teacher rights. You need to know the difference between procedural and substantive due process. So the procedural due process is the state may not, this means they cannot deprive you from any person of their life, liberty, or property rights. These are your constitutional rights. They cannot deprive you from these rights. The substantive due process is the state must have a valid reason as to why they are trying to deprive a teacher from these rights, the life, liberty, or property. And just so if you are in this situation, you need to know that you will potentially have to have a teacher dismissal proceeding with your local state board. And if it's higher than that, it may have to go to the actual state, your district board, and you have your state board. So you need to know that if things were to take a negative turn, they do again have to have the valid reason as to why they would like to deprive you from these constitutional rights. Again, but teachers we do have rights. You are afforded your First Amendment right, and you just need to know that the freedom of speech, teachers are allowed to have that freedom of speech as long as it does not cause any type of disruption in the educational environment of the school district. So you do have the right to have that freedom of speech, the freedom of expression. You are allowed to speak on issues outside of school. Again, when you are speaking on issues outside of school, you need to make sure that you are, again, not causing any disruption to your local school board or your local school district. But you do have the right as a citizen to speak on issues. Academic freedom. Teachers are allowed to express themselves in their classroom as long as you are not causing any hurt, harm, or danger to your students on what you're speaking on. You have the right to have that research discussion on various topics and issues. Again, you have to be very mindful of the audience and what comes out. So you have those rights. You just have to make sure that you are being very mindful of the things that you say. Social media is a big thing. Most school boards, well, all school boards have a social media policy. So as a teacher, you just need to make sure that you are abiding by your school's social media policy. Again, we are afforded the First Amendment right to speak outside of the school, but I ask you guys to just make sure that you exercise with caution. Know who is your intended audience on your social media. If you are friends with parents and your students, and you know that you're going to say something that is going to offend others, I advise you not to say that on your social media. Something I always tell people, you might think it, but don't say it, because that may cause a lot of issues for you. Just refrain from any messages or images on social media that would cause others to think of you differently. We have to just remember that we are educators, and educators are always looked at as role models. So you just have to be very mindful, and I would advise everybody to make sure that you are knowledgeable of your school district social media policy. So I just wanted to just touch on a violation of teacher rights. So I found an article, and a teacher from Louisiana was just at a local school board meeting, and it was time for the public to ask questions. And they were discussing the superintendent at their school district getting a raise. And so the question that was asked by a teacher was, why is the superintendent getting a raise when teachers haven't had a pay raise in years? This teacher was escorted out and she was arrested, and her First Amendment rights were violated. She had every right to have that freedom of speech and ask that question. She was not causing any hurt, harm, or danger because she simply asked a question during the public comment section of the superintendent or the school board meeting. So she did have to go to jail. She was not prosecuted, but this is a prime example of a teacher rights being violated because simply all she did was ask a question as to why the superintendent was getting a raise, because she just wanted to know when the teachers in that school district haven't had a raise in a while, and they broke her First Amendment right. She just asked a question, and that is freedom of speech. We are allowed to have freedom of speech. Okay, now student rights. Students have rules and regulations, especially regarding student conduct in a school setting. Students have those constitutional rights as adults, but you have to be very mindful of your students. Students they have rules on dress code, everything that is in a school handbook does pertain to students. Students, however, do have constitutional rights. I just want to touch on the Tinker case. Students wore all black armbands to school, and it was no evidence that they did anything wrong. They just did a silent protest. So students are allowed to have that freedom of speech and protest. The due process does provide students with the remedy against arbitrary or conspicuous acts by school officials. So just know that your students, they have rights also, as long as they are not doing anything that is causing any hurt, harm, or danger to the school and the students in the building. But students do have constitutional rights as adults, so they can participate in silent protest as long as it's not causing any disruption to the educational environment as well. Just an example of a violation of students' rights. I found an article, a charter school in Colorado, the students decided to do a peaceful protest. The students stood for just the normal Pledge of Allegiance. However, the charter school had a pledge also, and the students decided to do a peaceful protest, a silent protest, and they decided to not do the charter school's pledge, and they remained seated. The principal was very upset with all of the students that did not do the charter school's pledge, so he suspended all of the students. Parents, it caused a big uproar. Parents was very mad because the principal was not answering any questions. So they went to the newspaper and they just wanted to know, why was the student suspended? The students did nothing wrong. They had the right and their choice not to do the pledge if they didn't want to. And again, that is a violation of a student's constitutional rights. So school leaders, as a school leader, you just have to remember that all school leaders must follow the school district state board policies. School leaders are not exempt. They have to follow the state board policies as well. School leaders are expected to follow the same rules as classroom teachers and other school personnel. School leaders do have constitutional rights, but again, as school leaders, everyone is, even as teachers, school leaders, everyone is held to a higher standard. So you just have to be mindful and make sure that you are knowledgeable of your school state board policies and your school district policies as well, so that you don't find yourself getting into any trouble. So as I begin to conclude, I just want you all to know that teachers have constitutional rights. But again, I cannot say this enough. Be mindful of your rights. Know what to say and how to say it. Social media plays a big part in a teacher's career, especially a 21st century. Social media is all around. So if you wouldn't say it in your classroom in front of your students, I wouldn't post it on social media as well. Local school, a lot of states have local teacher associations. I will say, I'm looking to joining a teacher association just so that you can know the different laws and policies that teachers and school leaders are supposed to know. And again, just remember to always be positive. Your students have constitutional rights as well. So just make sure that you guys are following them. I thank you guys for listening to my presentation. If there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.